Your whole life is already finished. Not your body, not tonight, but the shape of your life, from the first morning you cannot remember to the last one you will never see coming, may already exist, complete, sitting in a direction you were built unable to face. The past you think is gone is not gone. The future you think is empty is not empty. According to some of the most tested physics human beings have ever written down, the flowing moment you're living right now is not the only real one. It is a single lit window in a house with countless rooms, and every one of them is occupied. So if this moment is not the only one that exists, then where exactly are all the others, and why can you never turn to look at them? Settle in and get comfortable. Subscribe if you have not, and stay with us tonight, because the road we're about to follow runs from a flat little creature that cannot see which way is up, all the way to the last thing your own life will ever become. Let's get into it. Part 1. The sentence you cannot unread. Right now, wherever you are, you're almost certainly convinced of one thing without ever having decided to be. You believe that this moment, the one you're living in as these words reach you, is the only one that truly exists. The past feels finished, folded up and put away, gone somewhere it can never be reached again. The future feels like an empty room you have not yet walked into, unwritten, waiting, made of nothing until you arrive to fill it. And the present, this thin sliver of time you're standing on, feels like the single lit window in an otherwise dark house. It feels like the only place the lights are on. That feeling is the most natural thing in the world. Every person who has ever lived has felt it, from the first human who watched a fire burn down to embers to you, tonight, listening in the quiet. It is so obvious, so constant, so woven into the fabric of being alive, that it has never once occurred to most of us to question it. Of course, the present is the only real moment. Of course, the past is gone and the future has not happened. What else could time possibly be? It is worth remembering that we have been this certain before, and this wrong before. For most of human history, every reasonable person knew, with the same unshakable certainty, that the earth stood perfectly still at the centre of everything while the sun and the stars wheeled around it. And they were not being foolish. They were trusting their own eyes, and their own eyes were telling the truth about what they saw. The sun does appear to rise on one side of the sky and cross to the other. The ground does feel utterly motionless beneath your feet. The mistake was not in the observing. The mistake was in assuming that the way things look from where we happen to stand is the way things actually are. And when the truth finally arrived, it was almost impossible to feel, because it contradicted the most obvious evidence of the senses. You are right now sitting on a ball of rock spinning at hundreds of miles an hour and racing around the sun at tens of thousands of miles an hour more, and you feel none of it. Not a breath of wind, not a trace of motion. The stillness you feel is real as a feeling, and completely false as a fact. I bring this up because the illusion we're about to examine is of exactly the same kind, only deeper and closer to home. It is not about where the Earth sits in space, it is about where you sit in time. And just as our ancestors could not feel the Earth move because they were riding along with it, we cannot feel the truth about time because we are riding along inside it, carried so smoothly and so completely that the motion is invisible to us. The certainty that only this moment exists may turn out to be the last great case of trusting our eyes when our eyes were never built to see the thing in question. The difference is that this time, the illusion is not out there in the sky. It is the very feeling of being alive, moment to moment, and to question it is to question something far more intimate than the position of a planet. Here is the sentence I want you to sit with, the one that is difficult to unhear once you have heard it. According to some of the most tested, most successful physics human beings have ever produced, that feeling may be the single largest illusion any of us ever lives inside. Not a small error, not a trick of memory or a quirk of perception around the edges, the whole thing. The idea that the present is the only real moment might be as mistaken as the idea that the Earth sits still while the sun moves around it, and for a strangely similar reason. We believe it because, from where we are standing, it genuinely looks that way. And where we are standing turns out to be a very misleading place to look from. Because if this physics is read the way many serious scientists read it, then your past is not gone. Your future is not empty. Every moment you have ever lived and every moment you have not yet lived exists right now, with exactly as much reality as the breath you're taking. The morning you were born is still out there. The last day of your life already exists, already has a location, already is, sitting at its own address in a structure so large and so strangely shaped that you have never once seen it and never will. Your entire life, from the first cry to the final quiet, may already be finished, complete, printed, and you're simply moving through it, one frame at a time, mistaking the movement for the making. I know how that sounds. I know it lands somewhere between a ghost story and a fever dream, and if some part of you wants to push it away, that instinct is healthy. We are going to earn this idea slowly, carefully, one honest step at a time, and I am not going to ask you to believe anything on my say-so, but I want to be clear from the start about where this road leads, because the destination is the reason people find this subject genuinely unsettling. This is not a video about a number in a textbook. It is a video about the possibility that you have misunderstood the most basic feature of your own existence, that the thing you call the passing of time is not the universe doing something, but you failing to see something, and that what you are failing to see is nothing less than the whole shape of your own life. To get there, we have to talk about dimensions, not in the science fiction sense, not portals and parallel worlds, but in the plain, quiet, mathematical sense of the word. Because the reason you cannot see your whole life at once turns out to be the same kind of reason a drawing on a page cannot see the room it is drawn in. It is a problem of dimension. There is a direction you cannot point to, a direction that is every bit as real as left and right and up and down, and everything strange and frightening and beautiful about your situation follows from the fact that you were built unable to look along it. For most of human history, nobody had the tools to even ask this question properly. Time was a mystery for poets and priests, not something you could put into an equation and test. That changed a little more than 100 years ago, when a handful of physicists chasing a completely different problem stumbled into something none of them were looking for. They were trying to understand light. They were trying to understand why the speed of a light seemed to be the same for everyone no matter how fast they moved. And in solving that puzzle, they were forced, almost against their will, to conclude that space and time were not two separate things at all. They were a single thing, stitched together into one fabric, and time was simply the fourth thread in a weave that had three others we already knew by instinct. Once you pull that thread, the ordinary picture of time begins to come apart in your hands. If time is genuinely a dimension, a direction like the directions of space, then the future being unreal starts to make about as much sense as the next town over being unreal, simply because you are not standing in it. The next town does not blink out of existence when you leave. It is just somewhere else. And the terrible, wonderful question this video is built around is whether the future and the past are somewhere else in exactly the same way. Not gone, not waiting to be born, just elsewhere, along a road you're travelling but cannot see the length of. You might reasonably ask why, if any of this were true, we would not simply feel it. Why does time feel so completely different from space? You can walk back to a place you have been, but you cannot walk back to a moment. You can see a whole vista spread out in front of you, mountains to the left and forest to the right, all at once, but you can only ever see one instant of time, the one you are in. That difference is real, and I'm not going to pretend it away. Time is not just space with a clock stuck to it. But hold on to the difference lightly, because by the end of tonight I think you will see that the reason time feels different is not that it is a different kind of thing, it is that you are moving through it in a way that only ever lets you meet it one slice at a time. The difference is not in the time, the difference is in you. There is a comfort in this that most people miss on the first pass, buried underneath the fear, and I want to plant it here at the very beginning so you can find it again at the end. If nothing about the past is truly gone, then no moment you have ever loved has actually been lost. It has only been left behind, the way a town is left behind, still there, still real, still lit, simply at a place on the road you have already driven past. The people you miss are not erased. They are elsewhere. We are going to spend most of this video in territory that feels cold and enormous and a little frightening, and that is honest, because the idea is frightening the first time you truly take it in. But the same physics that makes it frightening also makes a quiet promise, and the promise is that the universe may never actually throw anything away. For now, though, sit in the strangeness. You are breathing. This moment feels like the only real one. And 100 years of physics is about to suggest, gently and relentlessly, that it is not the only real one at all, that it is one lit window in a house with countless rooms, every one of them occupied, every one of them real, stretching away in a direction you have spent your entire life unable to turn and face. To understand how anyone could possibly claim such a thing, we cannot start with time. Time is too close to us, too tangled up with our own feelings, too easy to argue about. We have to start somewhere colder and cleaner. We have to start with a simpler question, one that sounds almost childish until you follow it far enough, and then it opens like a trapdoor under your feet. Before we can talk about the dimension you cannot see, we have to be very sure we understand the dimensions you can. So let us begin at the beginning, with the most basic question there is. What exactly is a dimension? Part 2. What a dimension really is. Let us take the mystery apart before we let it grow. The word dimension sounds heavy and technical, the kind of word that belongs on a chalkboard covered in symbols, but the thing it points to is so simple that you have understood it since you were a small child learning to find your way across a room. A dimension is nothing more than a direction you can move in. It is a single number you need in order to say exactly where something is. That is the whole idea. Everything else we build tonight rests on that one plain sentence, so let us make it solid before we climb. Imagine a single ant walking along a tightrope stretched between two poles. The rope is thin, and the ant can do only two things on it. It can go forward, toward one pole, or it can go back toward the other. That is all. There is no left, no right, no up, no down that means anything to a creature confined to that line. If you wanted to tell a friend exactly where the ant was, you would need to give them only one piece of information. How far along the rope? One number. That is what we mean when we say a line is one-dimensional. One number pins down every possible place a thing can be. Notice too that a dimension always comes with two ways to go along it, a pair of opposite directions. On the tightrope, the ant can head toward one pole or the other, forward or back along the single line. That pairing holds for every dimension we will meet. Left comes with right, up comes with down, forward comes with back. Each dimension is really a single axis with two opposite headings on it, like a road you can drive in either direction. This is a small thing, but it is worth fixing in place now, because when we later reach for a fourth dimension, part of what makes it so hard to picture is that it would have to come with its own pair of opposite headings, two brand new directions as different from up and down as up and down are from left and right, and there is simply nowhere in your imagination to put them. Every axis you have is spoken for. There is no unused pair of directions lying around for the fourth one to claim. And here is the quietly astonishing thing about the number of dimensions our space happens to have. There is nothing in the mathematics that says space had to have exactly 3. 2 would have worked as a consistent geometry, so would 5 or 11. The equations are perfectly comfortable with any number of dimensions you like, building shapes and measuring distances in all of them without the slightest complaint. 3 is simply the number our particular universe dealt us for the directions of space, the number our bodies were shaped to move through, and our eyes were shaped to see. It could, as far as pure logic is concerned, have been otherwise. That is a small crack of strangeness to keep in the back of your mind. The realization that the threeness of space is a fact about our world, and not a demand of reason, because it means the door to more dimensions was never closed by logic. It was only ever closed by us, by the limits of the creatures we are. Now let the ant step off the rope and onto a wide, flat tabletop. Suddenly its world has opened up. It can still go forward and back, but now it can also go left and right, and by combining those two, it can reach any point on the whole surface. To tell your friend where the ant is now, one number is no longer enough. You would have to say how far across and how far along, 2 numbers, because the tabletop has 2 independent directions built into it. That is a 2-dimensional world. A sheet of paper, the surface of a pond, the screen you might be looking at, all of them are 2-dimensional, because it takes exactly 2 numbers to specify any spot on them. Then let the ant do something it could never do before. Let it fly. The moment it lifts off the table, a 3rd direction appears, one that was always there but that a creature stuck to the surface could never use. Now there is up and down as well as the other 2. To describe where the flying ant is, you need 3 numbers: how far across, how far along, and how far up. And with that, we have arrived at the world you live in. Your room, your city, the space between the planets, all of it is 3-dimensional. 3 numbers, no more and no fewer, will locate anything, anywhere. Reach out and touch the corner of a table, and that corner sits at a precise crossing of 3 measurements: left to right, forward to back, up to down. This is the space you were born into, the only space your body has ever known. There is a way to make this even more concrete, using nothing but a single number in each case, because that is really what a dimension comes down to. If I want to tell you where to find a particular seat in a long single row of chairs, I need to give you exactly one piece of information, the seat number, counting from one end. That row is one-dimensional, and one number does the whole job. If I want to send you to a particular seat in a large theatre, one number is no longer enough. I have to give you a row and a seat, two numbers, because the floor of the theatre is a two-dimensional surface. And if I want to direct you to a specific apartment in a tall building, I need three. The street position that gets you to the building, and then which floor, how high up. That third number, the floor, is a genuinely new piece of information that the first two could never supply. And it corresponds to a genuinely new direction, straight up, that you cannot reach by any amount of walking around at street level. Counting the numbers you need is the same as counting the dimensions every time without fail. Keep that habit of counting in your mind because it is going to be the quiet tool that carries us all the way to the end. When we finally arrive at the strangest claim in this whole video, the claim that your life is a four-dimensional object, the argument will come down to exactly this kind of counting. To say where and when any event in your life happened, three numbers are not enough. Meeting a friend for coffee is not fixed by the three numbers that locate the cafe in space, because the cafe is there at every hour of every day. You need a fourth number to pin the meeting down completely, the time. And a piece of reality that genuinely needs four numbers to locate is, by the only definition that has ever made sense, a four-dimensional thing. We will get there slowly, but notice that the seed of the whole idea is already planted in something as ordinary as arranging to meet someone for coffee, in the plain fact that a place is never quite enough, and you always have to say when. Now I want you to notice something about how we built that ladder, because it holds the secret of everything that comes next. Each time we added a dimension, we did not add more of the same. We added a completely new direction, one that pointed somewhere none of the old directions could reach no matter how you combined them. When the ant went from the rope to the table, left and right were not hiding inside, forward and back, waiting to be discovered. They were genuinely new. Up was not a clever mixture of the flat directions. It stood at a right angle to all of them, pointing somewhere the tabletop simply did not go. That is the rule that makes dimensions what they are. Every new dimension is perpendicular to all the ones before it, a fresh direction that could not be built out of the old ones. Adding a dimension is not like adding more room. It is like adding another whole side to reality. Here is where your mind hits its first wall, and I want you to run straight into it on purpose, because feeling the wall is the entire point. We built the ladder from 1 to 2 to 3, each step a new perpendicular direction. Nothing in that pattern says we have to stop at 3. The pattern itself is happy to keep going, so take the next step, point in a fourth direction, one that stands at a right angle to left-right and to forward-back and to up-down, all at the same time. Go on, try to point that way. You cannot. There is nowhere for your finger to go. You can feel your mind reaching for it and coming back empty-handed, grasping at a direction that your whole body insists does not exist. And this is the strangest and most important fact in the entire subject, so let it land fully. Your failure to point in that fourth direction is not a failure of the mathematics. In mathematics, a fourth direction is no trouble at all. A point in four-dimensional space is simply a list of 4 numbers instead of 3, and every equation that works for 3 dimensions keeps working, smoothly and without complaint, for 4 and for 5 and for 100. The math strolls into higher dimensions without breaking stride. It is not confused, it is not blocked. It knows exactly what a fourth perpendicular direction is and can calculate with it all day long. The thing that cannot follow is you. Your brain was assembled cell by cell over hundreds of millions of years by a world that had exactly 3 dimensions of space to offer. Every ancestor you have, all the way back to the first thing that could be said to see, lived and hunted and hid in 3 dimensions. Your eyes evolved to catch light bouncing around a 3-dimensional world. The map your mind builds of the space around you has exactly 3 axes, because 3 axes were all there ever was to map. So when you try to imagine a 4th direction, you are asking a 3-dimensional instrument to picture something it has no wiring for, and it simply cannot be done. Not because you are not clever enough, not because you have not tried hard enough, because the tool you are using to look was never built to see that way. Sit with how unusual that situation is. Most things we cannot see because they are too far away, or too small, or hidden behind something else. Move closer, build a better telescope, turn on a light, and there they are. But this is different in kind. The fourth direction is not far away. If it exists, it is right here, threaded through the room you are in, no more distant than left or right. What keeps you from it is not distance and not darkness. It is the shape of your own perception. The door is not locked from the far side. The door is your own nervous system, and there is no handle on your side of it. That is a very particular kind of limit, and once you have felt it clearly, you will never be able to unfeel it. Because we are about to argue that you are living behind exactly such a door every second of your life, and that the room on the other side of it is your own future. Before we can make that argument land, though, we need to do something clever. We cannot picture a fourth dimension directly, so we are going to sneak up on it from below. If a three-dimensional creature cannot see a fourth dimension, then perhaps we can learn what that blindness feels like by watching a two-dimensional creature fail to see the third. We can drop down a rung on the ladder we just built to a world flatter than paper and study a being who is stuck there, certain that its flat world is all there is, unable to imagine the direction called up. And in watching that creature struggle, in seeing exactly what it cannot see and exactly how a larger world would look to it, we are going to learn, with a chill running up the back of the neck, precisely what our own situation might be. So let us leave our three-dimensional world for a while and go visit a place where the whole universe is as thin as a shadow. Part 3. The Creature Who Cannot See Up. In 1884, an English schoolmaster named Edwin Abbott sat down to write one of the strangest little books ever published. He called it Flatland, and on its surface it was a gentle satire of the rigid society he lived in. But underneath the satire he had built something that scientists and mathematicians are still using more than 140 years later, because he had found the single clearest way to think about a dimension you cannot see. He imagined a world that was perfectly flat. Not flat like a table, which still has a tiny thickness, but flat like an idea of flatness, an endless sheet with length and width and no height whatsoever. And he populated it with beings who lived their whole lives inside that sheet. Picture one of them, a small flat shape, a triangle or a square sliding around on the surface of the sheet like a coin on a tabletop, except the coin cannot ever lift off. A flatlander can move forward and back. It can move left and right. It can turn and travel in any direction that lies within the plane. But the word up has no meaning to it at all. There is no up in its world. If you tried to explain up, you would be pointing in a direction it cannot even conceive of, a direction perpendicular to everything it has ever known, and it would have exactly the same trouble you had a moment ago when I asked you to point along a fourth dimension. To the flatlander, up is not hard to reach. It is impossible to imagine. It is a nonsense syllable pointing nowhere. Now here is the first thing that should give you pause, because it is stranger than it first appears. A flatlander cannot even see its own world the way you and I see a picture of it. When you look down at a drawing of flatland on a page, you see the whole thing at once, all the little shapes spread out, the squares and triangles and their flat houses, every one of them complete and open to your view. But that is because you are looking from above, from the third dimension, along the very direction the flatlander does not have. The flatlander itself, living inside the plane, cannot rise up to get that overhead view. It is stuck at the level of the surface, looking sideways across it. And from that sideways position, it never sees a shape as a shape. It sees only an edge. Think about what that means with something familiar. Lay a coin flat on a table and lower your eye until it is level with the tabletop, looking across the surface. The coin, which you know is a full round circle, no longer looks round at all. It looks like a short straight line, a little segment, because you are seeing only its edge. That is how every flatlander sees every other flatlander, always and only. A fellow flatlander who is really a square or a pentagon appears as nothing but a line segment, and they have to work out each other's true shapes by clever indirect means, by how the brightness changes along that edge, by feeling their way around. They never simply see the whole of one another the way you see the whole of a drawing. Their entire universe is flatter and stranger than anything they are able to perceive, and crucially they have no way to know it. They are not tormented by the missing dimension. They do not lie awake grieving the direction called up. It simply is not part of their reality, and so its absence never even registers. Their blindness is invisible to them. I want to dwell on that last idea, the invisibility of the blindness, because it is the most important thing the Flatlanders have to teach us, and it is easy to walk past. We tend to assume that if we were missing something enormous about the nature of reality, we would at least feel the gap, sense the edges of what we cannot perceive, the way you can feel the edges of a word that is on the tip of your tongue. But the Flatlander shows us that this is not how missing a dimension works at all. The Flatlander does not experience the third dimension as a locked door or a dark region at the edge of sight. The Flatlander experiences nothing. There is no gap, no shadow, no sense of absence, because you cannot sense the absence of a direction you have no faculty to detect. The whole of the up and down world is not dim to the Flatlander, it is simply not there, as far as any experience of theirs could ever reveal. Their world feels seamless and complete to them, whole and finished, wanting nothing. Now turn that back on yourself gently, because this is the uncomfortable part. If you were missing an entire dimension of reality, if there were a direction just as real as left and right that you had no organ to perceive, you would not feel its absence either. Your world would feel seamless and complete, whole and finished, wanting nothing, exactly the way it feels to you right now. The very completeness of your experience, the very fact that reality seems to hang together with no missing pieces, is no guarantee at all that nothing is missing. The Flatlander's world felt complete too. That feeling of completeness is precisely what a trapped creature would feel whether or not a higher dimension existed, which means the feeling tells you nothing. So when some part of you objects that surely we would know if a whole dimension were hidden from us, remember the Flatlander, serene and certain in a world that is only a slice of the truth, feeling no gap where the entire third dimension should be. The absence of a sense of absence proves nothing. That is the first genuinely unsettling gift the flat world has to give. Now let us do the thing that turns this from a charming story into something with a cold edge. Let us bring in a creature from the dimension above. Let us bring in you. You're a three-dimensional being, and you can hover above the plane of Flatland, looking down along the up direction that no Flatlander can point to. And from up here, you can see everything. You can see every Flatlander at once, entire, the way you see shapes on a page. But you can see more than that, far more, and this is where a Flatlander would call you a god or a demon. You can see inside their sealed rooms. Consider it carefully. A Flatlander builds a house by drawing walls, line segments arranged into a square with a shape sitting safely inside. To another Flatlander, that house is a fortress. The walls block the line of sight completely. There is no way to see what is within without going through a door, because in a two-dimensional world a wall is an absolute barrier. But you, floating above, are not stopped by those walls at all. The walls have no roof, because a roof would require the up direction, and the Flatlanders have no up. From your vantage point, the house is like a square drawn on paper, with something inside it, utterly open, its contents plain to you. You can look straight down into the locked room and see the Flatlander pacing inside, seeing everything it believes is hidden. You could reach one finger down into the middle of that sealed room and touch what is inside without ever crossing a wall, appearing to the Flatlander as if from nowhere, from a direction it cannot even turn to face. And it is worse, or more wondrous, than a locked room. Because a Flatlander's own body is also just a flat shape, its insides are open to you as well. Where another Flatlander sees only the edge of its neighbour, you, from above, see the whole interior laid out, every part of it at once, the way you can see the entire inside of a circle, drawn on a page simply by looking at the page. Nothing about the Flatlander is hidden from you. Its walls, its rooms, its very insides, all of it is exposed, not because you are powerful, but purely because you are looking from a direction it does not have. To be trapped in a lower dimension is to be permanently, helplessly open to anything above you, and to never even know that the higher direction, or the eyes looking down it, exist at all. I want you to hold that feeling, because everything we say about your own life later is going to be built out of it. But first, let us watch what happens when a being from the higher dimension does not just look, but reaches in. Let us watch an ordinary three-dimensional object pass through the flat world, and let us watch it through the eyes of the Flatlander, so we can feel the full weight of the mystery. Imagine you are a Flatlander now. You're going about an ordinary day inside your flat world, seeing the usual sliding edges of your neighbours, the familiar lines of your streets, when something impossible happens in the middle of a sealed and empty room. A single point appears, a tiny dot, exactly where a heartbeat ago there was nothing at all, hanging in the centre of a space you know to be closed. Before you can even make sense of it, the dot is no longer a dot. It has become a small circle, an edge that curves, growing outwards smoothly and silently. The circle widens into a broad arc, and then into a great curving wall that fills the room, an edge so large it presses against everything, coming from a centre that was empty moments ago. There is no door it came through. There is no explanation your flat physics can offer. It is simply there, and it is growing, and you have no word for what it is. And then, for no reason you can see, it stops growing. It begins to shrink. The great curved wall pulls back inward, becoming a smaller circle, then a smaller one, contracting toward the centre as smoothly as it expanded, until it is once more only a tiny dot, a single point of edge. And then the point is gone. It does not leave through a door. It does not fade. It simply ceases, popped out of existence as mysteriously as it arrived, leaving the sealed room exactly as empty as before, as though nothing had ever been there at all. If you were that Flatlander, you would have witnessed a miracle or a haunting. You would tell the story for the rest of your life. Something appeared from nothing, swelled into a shape that had no business existing, and vanished back into nothing, inside a room that no one could enter. But you and I, looking down from the third dimension, saw exactly what happened, and it was not a miracle at all. It was the most ordinary thing imaginable. A solid ball, a simple sphere, was lowered slowly through the plane of flatland. That is all. As the very bottom of the ball first touched the surface, it made contact at a single point, and the Flatlander saw a dot. As the ball sank lower, the slice of it passing through the plane grew wider, the widest part of the ball crossing the surface as a large circle, and the Flatlander saw the circle swell. As the ball continued down and its upper half passed through, the slice shrank again, back to a point, and then the ball was through, gone below the plane entirely, and the Flatlander saw the shape vanish. The sphere never changed. It was a single, solid, unchanging object the entire time. What changed was only which slice of it the flat world was able to hold at each instant. The Flatlander could never see the ball. It could only ever meet one cross-section of it at a time, one thin circle where the sphere happened to be crossing the plane, and it mistook that parade of slices for a thing that grew and shrank and disappeared. I need you to remember that growing and shrinking circle. Photograph it in your mind and keep it somewhere safe, because we are going to come back to it, and when we do, it is going to stop being a story about a ball and a sheet of paper. That circle appearing from nowhere, swelling and vanishing, is going to turn out to be a picture of your own present moment. And the whole sphere, the solid, unchanging object that was always there, of which the poor Flatlander could only ever see a single slice, is going to turn out to be your life. But we are not ready for that yet. First we have to go the other way. We have watched a higher dimension reach down into a lower one. Now we have to try, as far as our three-dimensional minds will let us, to build the higher object itself. We have to try to construct a shape from the fourth dimension, and to see what happens to our minds when we do. Part 4. The Impossible Cube. To build a shape from the fourth dimension, we are going to use the same trick geometry always uses, the trick of building each dimension out of the one below it by dragging. It is a simple, almost playful process, and the beautiful thing about it is that you can follow every step perfectly, even though the final result will slip through your fingers. So let us build, patiently, from nothing. Start with a single point. A point has no size and no dimensions at all. It is just a location, a dot with nothing to it. Now take that point and drag it a certain distance in a straight line and watch what it leaves behind. As it travels, it sweeps out a trail, and that trail is a line segment, a short straight stick with a point at each end. We have made a one-dimensional object out of a zero-dimensional one, simply by dragging it in a new direction. Notice that our segment has two corners, the two endpoints. Hold on to that count. It matters. Now take the whole segment, the entire stick, and drag it sideways in a direction perpendicular to its length, the same distance again. As it moves, each point along it traces its own parallel line, and together they sweep out a flat square. We have made a two-dimensional object by dragging a one-dimensional one into a new direction, and count the corners now. The segment had two, and as we dragged it, those two corners traced out two more, So the square has 4, 2 became 4, the doubling has begun. There is something almost soothing about this way of building shapes, and it is worth savouring, because it is one of the few places in this whole subject where your intuition and the mathematics walk comfortably side by side. You can feel the rightness of it. A point smeared into a line smeared into a square smeared into a cube, each one just the last one dragged into a fresh direction, leaving a trail behind it like a brush loaded with paint. There is no trickery here, no leap you have to take on faith. Every step is something you can watch in your mind, clear and complete, and the pattern that emerges, the steady doubling of the corners, is so simple that a child can carry it forward. 1 corner, 2, 4, 8. Each new dimension folds a perfect copy of the old shape away from itself and joins the two with fresh edges. It is the most orderly construction in all of geometry, and its orderliness is exactly what makes what comes next so disorienting. Because the pattern does not know that it is supposed to stop. This is the crucial thing to feel before we take the final step. The rule we have discovered, drag the shape into a new perpendicular direction and let it double, is not a rule that contains any natural ending. It does not say, and stop when you reach the cube, because the cube is all that can exist. It just keeps offering the next step cleanly, indifferently, whether or not you have anywhere to put it. Your mind can climb the ladder easily from the point to the line, from the line to the square, from the square to the cube, feeling at home every step of the way. And then the pattern calmly hands you the next rung, the one your mind cannot stand on, and asks you to drag the cube into a direction that does not exist for you, and to accept that the result has 16 corners, even though you will never be able to see a single one of them in its true place. The arithmetic climbs on serenely into a country your imagination is forbidden to enter. That gap between how easily the counting continues and how completely the seeing fails is the exact place where the fourth dimension lives. Take the square next, the whole flat tile of it, and drag it in the one direction it is not already using, straight up perpendicular to its surface. Every point of the square rises together, and the shape they sweep out is a cube, a solid box, 3-dimensional, the shape of a die or a sugar cube or a cardboard carton. We have climbed another rung, and the corners have doubled again. The square had 4, and lifting it traced 4 more directly above them, so the cube has 8. 1 point, 2, 4, 8. Each time we drag into a new dimension, the number of corners doubles cleanly, without exception. And each time, the new object is bounded by copies of the old one. The cube, for instance, is wrapped in 6 flat squares, its 6 faces, each one a copy of the shape we dragged. Now, there is nothing in that process that tells us to stop at the cube. The pattern is perfectly happy to continue. So take the cube, the whole solid thing, and drag it in a 4th direction, one perpendicular to all 3 directions it already occupies. And here is where your mind protests, because you cannot picture where that direction points. But do not let the protest stop you, because the logic does not care that you cannot picture it. The logic simply proceeds. Drag the cube into that 4th perpendicular direction, and it sweeps out a 4-dimensional shape. Its 8 corners trace out 8 more, so the new shape has 16 corners. And just as the cube was wrapped in 6 flat squares, this new object is wrapped in 8 solid cubes, 8 whole 3-dimensional boxes forming its boundary, the way 6 flat tiles form the boundary of the cube. This shape has a name. It is called a tesseract, or sometimes a hypercube, and the name tesseract was coined in 1888 by a mathematician named Charles Howard Hinton, a man who spent years of his life trying to train his own mind to see the thing he had named. A tesseract is to a cube exactly what a cube is to a square, one full step up the ladder. We can even count its parts precisely, because the mathematics hands them to us without hesitation. A tesseract has 16 corners, it has 32 edges, it has 24 flat square faces, and it has 8 cubic cells, 8 complete cubes making up its surface. Hinton was so determined to make the shape feel real that he even gave names to the 2 new directions along the 4th axis, the way we say up and down. He called them Anna and Carter. Up, down, left, right, forward, back, Anna, Carter. A full set of directions for a world with 1 more dimension than ours, and yet, for all that precision, here is the fact that turns the tesseract from a curiosity into something that genuinely unsettles the people who study it. No human being has ever actually pictured one. not Hinton, who tried harder than almost anyone, not the mathematicians who calculate with tesseracts every day. Nobody, and almost certainly nobody ever will, because to truly see a tesseract, your mind would have to hold 4 perpendicular directions in view at once, and a 3-dimensional brain simply cannot do it. You can know everything about the tesseract. You can recite its 16 corners, and its 8 cubes, and its 24 faces. You can prove theorems about it, and you still cannot see it, any more than the Flatlander could see the sphere. Every picture of a tesseract you have ever come across, the famous image of a small cube nested inside a larger cube, with all their corners connected by slanting lines, is not a tesseract. I want to be very clear about that, because it is the same lesson the Flatlander taught us, now aimed at us. That nested cube image is a shadow of a tesseract. It is a 3-dimensional projection of a 4-dimensional object, in precisely the way that a drawing of a cube on a flat page is a 2-dimensional shadow of a 3-dimensional thing. When you draw a cube on paper, you cheat. You draw a square and another square behind it, and connect the corners with slanting lines, and your mind reads depth into the flatness. But it is not really a cube on the page. It is a flat picture your brain agrees to interpret as a cube. In exactly the same way, the nested cube tesseract is a solid model your brain is invited to interpret as a hypercube, a shadow cast down 1 full dimension. We are always looking at the shadow. We never get to see the object. Remember that phrase. We are always looking at the shadow, and we never see the object. It is going to come back later, and when it does, it will not be about geometry anymore. It will be about you. I want to slow all the way down here, because this is the moment where the whole subject first turns genuinely disquieting, and it is worth feeling clearly rather than rushing past. The strange thing about the tesseract is not that it is complicated. It is not complicated. A patient child can learn to count its corners in an afternoon. The strange thing is that understanding it completely and being utterly unable to see it are happening in the same mind at the same moment. You can hold the entire truth of the tesseract in your thoughts and still not form the faintest image of it, and that specific kind of failure is unlike almost anything else in ordinary life. Let me give you the closest comparison I know. Try to imagine a brand new colour, not a shade of a colour you already know, not a mixture, not a slightly different red or a blue or green, a genuinely new colour, one that is not made of any colour you have ever seen, as different from red and blue and green as those are from each other. Try, right now, to bring it into your mind. You cannot. No matter how hard you push, nothing comes, because your eyes and your brain were built to handle a particular set of colours, and a colour outside that set is not hidden behind a door you could open with more effort. It is outside the machinery entirely. Your inability to imagine it is not a lack of trying. It is a fact about the instrument you're using to imagine. The 4th dimension is like that new colour. It is not far away, and it is not complicated, and it is not waiting for a cleverer person to finally picture it. It is simply outside the machinery of a 3-dimensional mind, sealed off not by distance but by the shape of what you are. And I want you to sit in the quiet grief of that for just a moment, because it is a real and specific feeling, the feeling of knowing that something completely real is permanently closed to you, not because it is hiding, but because you were built without the door. It is the loneliest fact in geometry, and it is the exact feeling we're about to carry over onto the whole of your own life, because the claim at the centre of this video is that your life, from birth to death, is a 4-dimensional object of just this kind, real, whole, complete, and forever impossible for you to see all at once, for the very same reason you cannot see the tesseract or imagine the colour. You're trapped 1 dimension too low to take it in. But before we make that leap onto time, we have one more thing to learn from the geometry, and it is the most important thing of all. We have to see what a 4-dimensional object looks like when it passes through our world the way the sphere passed through Flatland. Because when it does, something happens that is going to unlock the entire mystery. A perfectly still, perfectly unchanging 4-dimensional object, when it slides through a 3-dimensional world like ours, does not look still at all. It looks like it is moving. And that single fact, that stillness can wear the mask of motion, is the key that fits the lock we have been walking toward since the very first sentence. Part 5. The Cross-Section Trap. Let us return to the poor Flatlander and the sphere, because there is a lesson in that scene we did not fully draw out, and it is the lesson everything now turns on. When the ball passed through the flat world, the Flatlander did not see a ball. It saw a circle that appeared from nothing, grew, shrank, and vanished. From inside the plane, a single solid object that never changed at all looked exactly like a thing that was born, transformed, and died. The Flatlander watched a drama of appearance and change unfold, and the whole drama was an illusion produced by one unmoving object sliding through a world too thin to hold it all at once. Now step everything up by one dimension and let it happen to us. Suppose a four-dimensional object, the four-dimensional cousin of a ball, a shape mathematicians call a hypersphere, were to pass through our three-dimensional space the way that sphere passed through the plane. What would we see? We could not see the hypersphere, of course, any more than the Flatlander could see the sphere. We are one dimension too low. What we would see instead is our own kind of slice. We would see an ordinary sphere, a plain round ball, appear out of absolutely nothing as a single point, swell smoothly up to some enormous size, then shrink back down to a point and blink out of existence, with no cause we could name and nothing left behind. To us it would be a ghost, an object materializing from empty air and dissolving back into it. But nothing would have appeared or vanished at all. A single, whole, unchanging four-dimensional object would simply have slid through the thin sheet of our reality, and we would have met it one cross-section at a time, one ball-shaped slice for each instant it spent crossing our space. The same thing happens with the tesseract, and it is even stranger to watch. Take that four-dimensional cube and rotate it and pass it through our space, and it does not hold still and keep its shape the way a solid should. It appears to writhe. Faces seem to sprout from nowhere and fold back into nothing. The whole thing looks like it is turning itself inside out, bending in ways no rigid object could ever bend, a restless, shifting, almost living thing. People who see animations of a rotating tesseract often describe them as hypnotic or faintly disturbing, because the shape refuses to behave like an honest solid. But here is the truth of it. The tesseract is not moving or changing at all. It is as rigid and unchanging as a brick. What is changing is only which three-dimensional slice of it we happen to be cutting through at each instant, exactly as the Flatlander's circle changed size while the sphere itself stayed perfectly still. The writhing is in our slicing, not in the shape. I want to name this plainly, because it is the hinge the whole video swings on. In a world with more dimensions than you can perceive, permanence can wear the mask of change. A completely fixed, completely finished, utterly motionless higher-dimensional object can look, to a trapped lower-dimensional observer, like something restless, unfolding, and alive. The observer sees a story of change and becoming, and the truth behind it is a single frozen shape being met one slice at a time. Let us make sure this inversion is fully felt, because everything depends on it, and it runs against every instinct you have. When you watch something change, your mind draws an automatic conclusion. It concludes that the thing itself is doing something, moving, transforming, acting. If a shape grows before your eyes, surely the shape is growing. If a form twists and folds, surely the form is twisting. That inference feels airtight, and the cross-section trap shows that it is not airtight at all, that there is a whole other explanation for change that never once occurred to you, because you have never lived anywhere it could apply. The change you see may not belong to the object at all. It may belong entirely to the relationship between a still object and the moving slice through which you meet it. The sphere did not grow, your window onto it moved. The tesseract did not writhe, your slice of it slid. Nothing on the object's side ever changed. All the change lived on your side, in the sweeping of the cut. This is such an unfamiliar idea that it helps to say it in the plainest possible terms. There are two completely different ways to produce the experience of change. The first is the obvious one, the one you know. A thing genuinely alters over time. The second is the one the higher dimensions reveal. A thing stays perfectly fixed, and you move past it, or through it, meeting different parts of it in succession, and stitching those parts together into the false impression of a thing in motion. From the inside, from the point of view of the trapped observer, these two are utterly indistinguishable. The growing circle looks exactly the same whether a circle is really swelling in the plane or a fixed sphere is passing through it. You cannot tell, from within your slice, which kind of change you are witnessing, and that is the loaded gun on the table, the one we are about to fire, because the most constant, most trusted change in your entire life, the flow of time itself, the ceaseless sense that this moment is becoming the next, is precisely the kind of change you have no way to distinguish from a fixed object being met one slice at a time. Hold that sentence up to the light and keep it there, because we are about to turn it on the one form of change you trust more than any other, the one you have never once doubted in your life. We are about to turn it on the passing of time itself, but first, let us feel the fear that lives inside this geometry, because it is real, and it is not the fear of a monster. It is the fear of being seen. Imagine you're sitting in an ordinary room, the one you're in now. The walls are solid. The door is closed. You feel, as everyone always feels, that you have an inside and an outside, that your skin is a boundary, that your thoughts are private, that there is a sealed interior to you that no one can look into without your leave. Now suppose a four-dimensional object begins to pass through your room the way the sphere passed through Flatland. At first it is only that ghostly ball, appearing in the air in front of you as a single point, swelling into a sphere the size of a beach ball, then a boulder, filling the space, then shrinking and winking out. That alone would empty the blood from your face. But now suppose the thing passing through is not a smooth, featureless ball. Suppose it is something with structure, something that, from its side of the fourth dimension, can look at you the way you can look down at a drawing on a page. Then understand what it sees. It does not see your surface, the way the people around you see it. It sees you the way you see the inside of a circle drawn on paper, the whole interior open at once. It sees inside your closed room without opening the door, because to it your walls have no roof along the fourth direction, exactly as the Flatlanders' walls had no roof along the third. It sees your bones inside your skin, laid open, every organ and every hollow of you visible in a single glance. It sees the back of this moment as easily as the front. It could see your thoughts forming, if thoughts have a shape, arriving before you have spoken them. To this thing, you are not a solid, sealed, private person at all. You are an open figure on a flat page, every part of you exposed at once, seen completely from a direction you cannot even turn your head toward. You would never catch sight of it. It would see the whole of you, always, effortlessly, and there would be nothing you could hide and nowhere you could hide it. Let that settle, because it changes something quiet and profound about how you understand yourself. The privacy you feel, the sense that there is a sealed interior to you, is not necessarily a fact about reality. It may be only a fact about your viewpoint. To anything standing even one dimension higher than you, the walls you trust are open, the skin you think of as a boundary is a line on a page, and the inner life you consider hidden is on full display. Solidity, privacy, the sense of a protected inside, all of these could be nothing more than the comforting illusions of a creature that can only see 3 dimensions at a time. That is the genuine chill at the center of the geometry, and it has nothing to do with aliens or ghosts. It is simply what it means to live trapped below a dimension. You are right now, if reality has even one more direction than you can perceive, already completely seen. Now, I have led you through all of this carefully for a reason, and it is time to say what the reason is. Everything so far, the ladder of dimensions, the Flatlander, the sphere through the plane, the tesseract we can only see as a shadow, the hypersphere passing through your room, all of it has treated the fourth dimension as a hidden direction of space, a secret room off to the side where higher shapes live, and that has been a useful fiction, a training ground. But here is the turn the whole video has been walking toward. Our universe really does have a fourth dimension. It is not hypothetical. It is not tucked away in a mathematician's notebook. It is measured, tested, and woven through every moment of your existence. But it is not a hidden direction of space at all. It is time. The fourth dimension of the world you live in is time, and once you understand that, every single thing we just learned about spheres and tesseracts and flatlanders comes rushing back with a new and personal meaning. Because if time is a dimension, a real direction of the universe like left and right and up and down, then a four-dimensional object stretched out along it would be something you know very well. It would be a life. Your life, spread out from birth to death along the time direction, would be a single four-dimensional shape, as whole and as fixed as that sphere. And your experience of living, this relentless sense of one moment giving way to the next, might be nothing more than you meeting that shape one slice at a time, one cross-section for each instant, mistaking the parade of slices for a thing that is happening rather than a thing that simply, timelessly, is. To see how physics was forced to this astonishing conclusion, we have to go back to the beginning of the 20th century, to a young patent clerk, and to the discovery that space and time were never two things at all. Part 6. The Fourth Dimension. Was time all along? In 1905, a young man working as a clerk in a Swiss patent office published a handful of papers that would remake our picture of reality, and he was not trying to overthrow time. He was trying to understand light. Albert Einstein had been troubled by a strange fact that experiments kept insisting on, a fact that made no sense under the old rules. The speed of light appeared to be the same for everyone, no matter how they were moving. That should be impossible. If you run toward a beam of light, common sense says the light should come at you a little faster, the way a headwind feels stronger when you walk into it. If you run away, it should come at you slower. But no. Measure the speed of a light while standing still, or while racing toward its source, or while fleeing from it, and you always get the same answer, exactly the same, down to the last decimal. Light refuses to play by the ordinary rules of adding and subtracting speeds. Einstein followed that stubborn fact wherever it led, and it led somewhere astonishing. For the speed of light to stay fixed for everyone, something else had to give, and the thing that gave was the two things everyone had always assumed were absolute and unchanging: space and time. Einstein showed that measurements of distance and duration are not the same for all observers. A moving clock runs slow compared to a stationary one. A moving object is shortened along its direction of travel. Two people moving differently will disagree about how long a journey took and how far apart two places are, and neither of them is making a mistake. Space and time, it turned out, are flexible. They stretch and shrink depending on how you move, trading off against each other in a precise dance, all so that the speed of light can stay the one thing that never changes. I know how abstract that can sound, so let me anchor it in something that touches your ordinary life every single day, because this is not a story about exotic conditions in a laboratory. The satellites that let your phone tell you where you are, the ones spinning around the Earth carrying the timing signals that pin your location to within a few steps, are moving fast enough and sitting high enough in the planet's gravity that their clocks and the clocks on the ground genuinely drift apart. Time on those satellites runs at a measurably different rate than time in your pocket. If engineers did not correct for that difference, hour by hour, the location your phone gives you would wander off, drifting by miles within a single day. Time dilation is not a philosopher's daydream. It is a correction written into the machinery you carry everywhere, a small daily accommodation the whole system makes to the fact that time is not the same for everyone. Every time your phone quietly knows where you are, it is because someone accounted for the fact that a moving clock keeps a different time than a still one. Once you accept that space and time bend and stretch in these measurable everyday ways, the ground under the ordinary picture of time has already started to soften, whether or not you have noticed. If your sense of how long a second lasts and how far apart 2 points are can both be altered simply by how you are moving, then time and space were never the fixed, absolute backdrops we always imagined them to be. The unchanging stage on which everything else plays out. They are part of the play, they flex with the actors, and Minkowski's insight was that the only way to make sense of all this flexing, the only way to find the solid thing underneath the shifting measurements, was to stop thinking of space and time as two separate stages at all, and to see them as a single four-dimensional structure that different observers were simply viewing from different angles. The bending of time and the bending of space are not two mysteries. They are one object, seen crooked. At first, this looked like pure chaos, a world where nothing could be pinned down and everyone had their own private measurements. But 3 years later, in 1908, a mathematician named Hermann Minkowski, who had actually once been Einstein's teacher, saw the hidden order underneath the chaos. He realized that although space and time separately were flexible and observer-dependent, there was a way to combine them into a single thing that everyone could agree on. If you stopped treating space and time as two independent arenas and started treating them as one unified fabric, four-dimensional, 3 dimensions of space and one of time stitched together, then the confusion resolved. The stretching of time and the shrinking of space were revealed as two sides of one coin, two different views of a single four-dimensional structure seen from different angles. Minkowski gave that structure a name that we still use. He called it space-time, and he announced it with a line that has rung through physics for more than a century. Space by itself, he declared, and time by itself are doomed to fade away into mere shadows, and only a kind of union of the two will preserve an independent reality. Read that again slowly, because he was not being poetic for the sake of it. He was stating, as a mathematical result, that space alone and time alone are not the fundamental things they appear to be. They are like shadows cast by a single higher object, and that object, the only thing that is truly real and truly agreed upon by everyone, is the four-dimensional fabric of space-time. Every event that has ever happened or ever will happen is a point in that fabric, fixed by four numbers, 3 that say where and 1 that says when. Not where or when, where and when together, inseparably, as a single address in a four-dimensional world. Now I have to be honest with you about something, because intellectual honesty is the whole point of thinking clearly about this, and it would be easy to cheat here. Time is not exactly the same as the 3 dimensions of space, and I am not going to pretend it is. There are real differences. You can move any direction you like through space, forward or back, left or right, freely, at will. But you cannot move freely through time. You're carried through it in one direction only, always toward the future, never able to stop, never able to turn around and walk back to yesterday. And in the actual mathematics of space-time, the time dimension does not enter the equations in quite the same way the space dimensions do. It comes in with a different sign, a minus where the others have a plus, and that small difference in the math is what keeps causes reliably in front of their effects and stops the whole structure from dissolving into paradox. So time is genuinely a special dimension. It is not just space with a clock stuck on it. I want you to hold that difference honestly rather than sweep it under the rug. But, and this is the hinge on which everything turns, none of those differences change the one fact that matters most for us tonight. In the underlying structure of relativity, time is still a dimension. It is a real axis of the universe, a genuine direction along which events are laid out, as real and as fully a part of the fabric as any direction of space. And here is the part that should make the floor tilt under you. When physicists write down the equations that describe space-time, the equations that have passed every experimental test we have ever devised, from the ticking of atomic clocks on airplanes to the timing signals of the satellites that guide you home, those equations describe the whole fabric at once. They do not single out any one moment along the time axis as special. They do not contain a marker that says this instant right here is the real present, and all the others are either dead or unborn. The privileged, glowing now that feels so overwhelmingly real to you, the single lit moment you're standing in, appears nowhere in the physics. The equations know about the whole of time, spread out all at once, and they treat every moment exactly alike. Think about how strange that is. Your entire lived experience is organized around the present moment. Now is where you are. Now is when things happen. The past is a memory, and the future is a hope, but now is real in a way nothing else is. It is the most obvious fact of your existence, and our best, most tested description of the universe simply does not have it. There is no now in the equations. There is no line sweeping through space-time marking off the finished past from the waiting future. There is just the fabric, entire, with every event sitting at its fixed address, no more coming into being and no more passing away than the cities on a map come into being as you drive toward them. The map does not make Chicago real the moment you cross into Illinois. Chicago was always there, and space-time, as physics describes it, does not make tomorrow real the moment you arrive. Tomorrow, in the mathematics, is simply already there, at its own coordinate, waiting at the end of a road that already exists. This is the doorway to the whole frightening idea, and you can feel it swinging open. If the present is not special in the physics, if there is no real dividing line between past and future, then the ordinary picture of time, the picture where the past is gone and the future has not yet happened and only the present exists, has quietly lost its foundation. That picture requires a real, universe-wide now to separate the dead past from the unborn future, and the physics does not have one, so we are left staring at a possibility that the human mind can barely hold. Maybe the past has not vanished. Maybe the future is not empty. Maybe all of it, every moment, is simply there, at its own place in the fabric, equally real, and the reason you cannot see it that way is the same reason the flatlander could not see the sphere. You're meeting a four-dimensional structure one slice at a time, and calling the parade of slices the passing of time. But maybe, you might say, this is just a quirk of the mathematics. Maybe the equations leave out the present the way a map leaves out the traffic, and the now is real even if the physics ignores it. That would be a fair objection, and if it were the only argument, we could set the whole thing aside as a curiosity. But it is not the only argument, because relativity does not merely stay silent about the present moment. It goes further, and this is where the idea stops being a philosophical maybe and starts to bite. Relativity says that different observers, moving differently, will actually disagree about which events are happening now, and that there is no fact of the matter about who is right. The present is not just missing from the equations, the present is not even the same for everyone, and once you see why, the last floorboard holding up the ordinary picture of time gives way beneath you. Part 7. The Death of Now. The idea that everyone shares a single present moment feels so obvious that it is hard to even see it as an idea. Of course, this instant, right now, is happening everywhere at once. Right now, as you listen, there is a present moment on the far side of the Earth, and on the Moon, and in a galaxy 1 billion light years away. All of it now. All of it the same slice of time you're standing in. That shared, universe-wide now is the invisible scaffolding of the ordinary way we think about time. It is what lets us say the past is gone and the future has not happened, because it draws the line, everywhere at once, between what is finished and what is still to come. And relativity takes that scaffolding and quietly removes it. The trouble comes from a result that sounds modest but detonates everything, called the relativity of simultaneity. It says that whether two separated events happen at the same time is not a fixed fact. It depends on how you are moving. Two observers in motion relative to each other will genuinely disagree about whether two distant events were simultaneous, and crucially, neither of them is wrong. There is no experiment that could settle who has the true present, because there is no true present to find. Each observer carries their own. The classic way to feel this uses a moving train, and it is worth walking through slowly because the conclusion is so hard to accept. Imagine a very long train moving down a track, and imagine lightning strikes both ends of it, the front and the back, at what appears to be the same moment. A person standing on the platform exactly halfway along sees the two flashes reach her eyes at the same instant. Since she is midway between the two strikes and light travels at a fixed speed, she concludes, correctly for her, that the two strikes happened simultaneously. Now consider a passenger sitting in the exact middle of the train, moving forward with it. As the train carries him toward the flash at the front and away from the flash at the back, the light from the front reaches him first, before the light from the back. From his point of view, moving with the train, the front strike happened before the back strike. They were not simultaneous at all. So which of them is right? The woman on the platform who says the strikes were simultaneous, or the passenger on the train who says the front came first? And relativity gives an answer that is calm and devastating in equal measure. Both of them are right. There is no deeper fact that overrules them, no view from nowhere that reveals the true order. Simultaneity, the very idea of two distant things happening at the same time, is not built into the universe. It is relative to your motion. The woman's now and the passenger's now are simply different, both equally valid, and the universe offers no way to choose between them. It is tempting to try to wriggle out of this, and people always do, so let us close the exits one at a time. You might think the disagreement is just about when the light happened to reach each person's eyes, a mere delay in the messenger, and that if they each did the arithmetic and subtracted the travel time of the light, they would come back into agreement about what really happened at once. But they would not. This is the part that catches everyone off guard. Even after both observers carefully account for how long the light took to reach them, correcting perfectly for every delay, they still disagree about whether the two strikes were simultaneous. The disagreement is not in the seeing. It is in the very fabric of what now means when you are moving. Simultaneity itself, the actual question of whether two distant things happen at the same moment, has a different answer depending on your motion, and no amount of careful bookkeeping will bring the two answers together, because there is no single answer hiding underneath for the bookkeeping to find. You might then reach for one more escape, the most natural one of all. Surely you think one of them is really right. Surely there is a true answer about whether the lightning struck the two ends at the same time, even if the two observers cannot agree on it, some God's eye fact of the matter that settles it. And this is exactly the assumption relativity dismantles. There is no such fact. The universe does not keep a master clock ticking off a single official, now that everyone else's clocks are approximations of. The master clock does not exist. Each observer's slicing of time into moments is as valid as any other's, and there is no privileged slice, no true present, no correct way to cut the four-dimensional fabric into a stack of nows. This is not a limit on what we can know. It is a statement about what is there, and what is there is a fabric with no built-in division into past and future, sliced differently by everyone who moves through it, and identically by no two people at all. The single shared present, the one we all take for granted, does not exist. Each observer slices the four-dimensional fabric of space-time into moments in a slightly different way, at a slightly different angle, and no slicing is the correct one. On a train the difference is tiny, far too small to notice, because the speeds involved are so small compared to the speed of light. But the effect does not stay small when the distances grow enormous, and this is where a physicist named Roger Penrose sharpened the idea into something that genuinely alters how you see your place in time. He asked us to consider two people simply walking past each other on a street, one strolling in one direction, the other in the opposite direction, at an ordinary walking pace. Their speeds differ by almost nothing. But now ask what each of them counts as happening now, not nearby, but in a galaxy far across the cosmos, the Andromeda Galaxy, some 2.5 million light-years away. Because their tiny difference in motion tilts their slice of the present by a tiny angle, and because Andromeda is so staggeringly far away, that tiny tilt, stretched across 2.5 million light-years, adds up to a difference of days. Sit with what that means concretely. For one of the two pedestrians, some event in the Andromeda Galaxy, say a fleet of ships beginning a long voyage, has not yet happened. It is still in the future. For the other pedestrian walking the other way on the same sidewalk at the same instant, that same event has already happened. The ships have already departed, and both of them are completely correct. There is no fact about whether the Andromeda fleet has launched or not, independent of how you happen to be walking down a street. Two people brushing shoulders on a sidewalk disagree correctly about whether an event millions of light-years away lies in the future or the past. So ask yourself the question Penrose was driving at. If the future of Andromeda is already so definite that the direction of your afternoon stroll determines whether it has happened yet, then in what sense is that future not already real? How can something be genuinely unwritten and not yet existing, if which side of now it falls on depends on nothing more than which way a stranger is walking? This is the logical pressure that pushes so many physicists toward a single, staggering conclusion. If there is no objective, universe-wide present moment, if what counts as now is different for every observer, and no observer is privileged, then the whole business of dividing time into a real present, a vanished past, and an unreal future stops making sense. There is no line that everyone agrees marks off what exists from what does not, because everyone draws the line differently. And what you're left with, when the line dissolves, is the entire fabric, all of it, every moment standing on equal footing. The past has not stopped existing. The future is not waiting to be made. It is all simply there, at its own coordinates, as real as the moment you're in, and the only thing that made you think otherwise was the powerful, persistent, and apparently mistaken feeling that your particular now is the only real one. I want to slow down now and lower my voice, because this is the moment the whole video has been walking toward, and it deserves to be said gently rather than dramatically. If this reading of the physics is right, then something is true about you that is difficult to hold in the mind without a kind of vertigo. The day you will die is not waiting for you somewhere up ahead, in an empty, unwritten future. It already exists. It has its own place in the fabric of space-time, its own set of 4 coordinates, as real and as fixed and as present, in the deepest sense as yesterday. And it is not only the ending. Every ordinary morning you have not yet woken to, every conversation you have not yet had, the last time you will ever see each person you love, all of it already exists, already sits at its address, already is. Nothing about your life is truly pending. From the first coordinate to the last, it is all already there, laid out along the dimension you cannot see, complete. That is the sentence I promised you at the very beginning, the one that is hard to unhear, and now you can see it did not come from nowhere. It came from following honest physics honestly, one step at a time. Your whole life may already exist, finished, while you're still in the middle of living it. This is where the word on the thumbnail comes from, the word terrifying, and I'm not going to talk you out of the feeling, because the feeling is a reasonable response to a genuinely staggering idea. There is a real vertigo in learning that your life might be a completed object, that the ending is already written and sitting out there at its coordinate, and that you have simply not driven to it yet. Let yourself feel the weight of that rather than rushing past it. But before the fear hardens into despair, I want to plant two things that we will return to, because the picture is not finished, and the fear, honestly examined, does not lead where it first seems to. The first is that a life being already there is not the same as a life being meaningless or forced, and we will see why. And the second is quieter, and it is this. If the ending already exists at its coordinate, then so does everything else. So does every good morning. So does every person you have lost, still there, still real, at their own place in the fabric, never actually gone. The same physics that says your death already exists says that nothing you have loved has ever truly stopped existing either. We will come back to that, but first, we have to look squarely at the full shape of the claim, the idea that gathers all of this together and gives it a name. We have to look at the block. Part 8. The block. The picture we have been circling has a name among physicists and philosophers. They call it the block universe, and sometimes they call it eternalism, and the name is worth understanding because it captures the whole strange shape of the idea in a single word. In this picture, the universe is not a stage on which events happen one after another, with the past struck down and cleared away and the future built fresh moment by moment. The universe is a block. It is a single, solid, four-dimensional object that contains all of space and all of time at once. Every event that has ever happened and every event that ever will, all of it there together, fixed and complete, like a shape carved out of one piece of crystal. Nothing in the block is coming into being. Nothing is passing away. It simply is, entire, timeless, all at once. To picture it, imagine you could somehow rise up out of time the way you rose above flatland and look down on the whole of history spread out before you. You would not see events happening. You would see them there all at once, laid out along the time direction like a country laid out in space. The birth of the universe would be at one end, not as an event that occurred and then was over, but as a region of the block permanently present at its own location. Your own birth would be there, a bright coordinate somewhere along your stretch of the fabric. This moment, the one you are living now, would be there too, not specially lit, not privileged, just one more location among all the others, and your death would be there, further along, as fixed and as real as your birth, no more approaching than your birth is receding, because from outside time nothing approaches or recedes at all. It all just is. The hardest part of this picture to accept is not that the future exists. It is that the future's already existing does not feel like anything from the outside, because there is no outside to stand on, and no moment at which the whole thing is being surveyed. We keep wanting to ask when the block is true, as if there were some super moment, some grand present, from which all of history could be seen laid out at once. But that question smuggles time back in through the side door. The block is not true at a moment. It does not come into being, does not get finished, does not sit there having been completed at some particular hour. It simply is, without tense, the way the number 7 simply is, the way a mathematical truth simply holds without ever having been switched on. Past, present, and future are directions within it, not stages it passes through. There is no cosmic clock outside the block ticking off its construction, because all the clocks are inside it, threaded along its time direction, each one reading whatever it reads at its own location. This is genuinely difficult to hold in the mind, and if it makes your thoughts slip and slide, that is not a failure on your part. It is the mind trying to picture timelessness, using equipment built entirely for time. Every word we have for existence is soaked in tense. To exist, we say, is to exist now. To be real is to be present. Our whole language assumes the very flowing now that the block universe denies, which is why every attempt to describe the block ends up sounding slightly paradoxical, as though we are saying the future already exists and tripping over the word already, which is itself a word about time. The block is not asking you to imagine the future existing now. It is asking you to loosen the grip of that word now altogether, to consider that now is not a feature of the universe, but a label you carry with you, pointing always and only at wherever you happen to be along the time direction. The way here is not a feature of space, but a label that points at wherever you happen to be standing. There is no universal here in space. The block says there is no universal now in time, and once the universal now is gone, the future has nowhere left to be unreal. One useful way to hold this is to think of a reel of film. When a movie plays, it feels as though the story is unfolding, one moment giving way to the next. The past scene's gone and the future scene's not yet made, but the film reel itself, sitting in its canister, contains every frame at once, already there, from the opening shot to the final one, complete and unchanging. The sense of a story unfolding is created entirely by the projector, moving through the frames one at a time, shining its light on a single frame in each instant. The unfolding is in the projection, not in the film, and the block universe says that your life is like the film, not like the projection. Every frame of it already exists, printed from first to last. What you call the passing of time is the light of your own awareness moving along the reel, illuminating one frame at a time, making a finished, motionless object feel like a story being told. And now the image I asked you to keep safe comes back, the one from the very beginning of our journey into Flatland. Remember the circle that appeared out of nowhere in the sealed room, grew, shrank, and vanished, and how the Flatlander mistook it for a thing that was born and died, when really it was only the slices of a solid sphere passing through the plane. That circle was never just a lesson about geometry. That circle is your present moment. Your now, this single instant you're able to perceive, is one three-dimensional slice through the four-dimensional object of your life. And the smooth, relentless flow you feel, this sense of one moment sliding into the next, is your slice sweeping along the time direction, meeting your own life one cross-section at a time. The life itself, the whole four-dimensional shape of it from birth to death, is not flowing anywhere. Like the sphere, it simply is, complete and motionless, and it only feels like a story unfolding because you are built to meet it one slice at a time. You are the Flatlander. Your life is the sphere. And the growing, shrinking circle that so mystified the flat creature is the very moment you are living right now. Let me ask you to do the impossible thing gently, just for a moment, the way we try to picture the Tesseract. Try to rise out of the flow of your own time and see your life the way you would see an object. Not as a sequence of events, but as a single shape, standing there whole. There you are as a newborn at one end, and there you are as an old person at the other, and every version of you in between. The child, the young adult, the person you are tonight, all of them not gone and not yet, to come but simply there, at their places, parts of one continuous object stretched along the time direction like a long ribbon threaded through the years. Every moment you have ever cried, every ordinary Tuesday, every time you have laughed until it hurt, the whole of it, present at once, a single sculpture in four dimensions that you can never see whole, because you are always inside it, always at one point along it, always meeting it one slice at a time. You have never once seen your own life. You have only ever seen the slice you are standing in. The whole shape has been there the entire time, and you were built unable to look at it. There is a phrase for what this implies, and I want to say it plainly even though it lands cold the first time, because we are going to warm it later. In the block universe, the universe never throws anything away. Nothing that exists ever stops existing. Every moment is permanent, sealed into the fabric at its coordinate, forever. Said in the middle of the night, that can sound like a sentence of imprisonment, as though every mistake and every loss is locked in place for all eternity, unerasable, fixed. And it is true that the block is fixed. But hold the phrase lightly, because the same permanence that sounds like a prison from one angle is going to sound like a mercy from another, and the difference between the two is only where you are standing when you look at it. This is not, I want to stress, a fringe idea whispered at the edges of physics. It is one of the most natural readings of the most successful theory we have, and the man who built that theory seems to have believed something very close to it, and to have found comfort in it at the hardest possible moment. We know this because of a letter, but before we get to the letter, I want to close this part by letting the full weight of the block settle, because you cannot appreciate the comfort until you have felt the vertigo honestly. Everything is already there. The good and the terrible, the beginning and the end, all fixed, all present, all real. The version of you reading a moment ago already belongs to the past section of the block, unreachable to you now but not gone, still sitting at its coordinate. The version of you an hour from now already exists, already doing whatever it is about to do, at its own place further along. Your first memory and your last breath are equally real, equally present in the only sense that ultimately counts, separated not by existence and non-existence, but only by their locations along a direction you cannot point to. The story of your life is not being written. It is being read by you, one line at a time, and you have mistaken the reading for the writing your entire life. Consider how completely this reverses the ordinary feeling of what it is to be alive. When you look back on your childhood, it feels gone, dissolved, surviving only as a few faded pictures in your memory and a handful of photographs. When you think of yourself as a small child, you think of someone who used to exist and does not anymore, a person the years have carried off and erased. But the block says the opposite. That child is not gone. That child is still there, exactly where they always were, at their coordinate in the fabric, living that afternoon in the sun for the first time still. It is only your slice that has moved on. From your present position along the time direction, the child is out of reach, behind you on the road, but out of reach is not the same as unreal, and behind you is not the same as erased. Everything you have ever been, you still are, at its own place. You are not the withered remainder of all your former selves. You are one moving slice of an object that contains every one of them, whole and undiminished, all at once. And the same is true forward. The person you will be at the end of your life, old and changed and carrying everything that is going to happen to you between now and then, already exists too, already sits at their coordinate, already looks back along the whole length of the object that the two of you share. In a sense that is difficult to feel but not difficult to state, that future self is not waiting to be born out of your choices like a statue waiting to be carved from a block of stone. They are already there in the stone, already finished, and your living forward is the slow uncovering of a shape that was complete before you reached it. This is the thought that empties the blood from the face on the first encounter, and I am not going to soften it yet. The whole of you, every age and every moment, is already there. You're reading a book you cannot put down and cannot skip ahead in, and every page is already printed and you have simply not turned to them yet. That is the block universe, in full, and it is easy to see why the first honest encounter with it feels less like learning a fact and more like the ground opening. But the ground is not the end of the story. There is a voice that reached this same conclusion, and standing beside a grave, found in it not horror but something gentler. Let us hear it. Part 9. The Light That Feels No Time. In the spring of 1955, Albert Einstein learned that his oldest and closest friend had died. Michel Besso had been beside him since their student days, the one person Einstein thanked in his Great Relativity paper, a friend across a lifetime of letters and long conversations about the nature of the world. Besso died in March. Einstein, himself gravely ill, would follow him only a few weeks later, and in his letter of condolence to Besso's family, Einstein wrote a sentence that people have been turning over ever since, because it was not the ordinary language of grief. It was the voice of a man saying what his physics had taught him, offered as comfort to the people left behind. People like us, he wrote, who believe in physics, know that the distinction between past, present and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. Read that in the setting where it was written, and it stops being an abstraction. Einstein was not scoring a philosophical point. He was writing to a grieving family weeks before his own death about a man he had loved for more than 50 years, and what he offered them was not that Besso lived on in memory or in spirit, but something stranger and, to him, apparently more solid. He was saying that Besso had not truly slipped away into a dead and vanished past, because in the underlying structure of space-time the past does not stop being real. Besso was still there, at his coordinates, at every moment of the life he had lived, as present in the fabric as he had ever been. The separation the family felt was real as an experience, but the physics said it was the illusion of creatures trapped in the flow, mistaking their own motion along the time direction for the disappearance of everything behind them. To Einstein, the man who understood space-time better than anyone alive, the past was not a graveyard. It was a place he could no longer visit, but that was still, in every sense that mattered to the equations there. You do not have to be certain Einstein was right to feel the force of that, but I want to give you something firmer than a letter, something built into the physical world itself that shows how strange and how far from universal the flow of time really is. And for that, we turn to light. Because light, it turns out, keeps a secret that makes the whole idea of a single, marching present very hard to sustain. Recall that relativity says the faster you move, the slower your time runs compared to everyone else. This is not a theory anymore, it is measured every day. Atomic clocks flown on airplanes come back very slightly behind clocks left on the ground. The satellites that let your phone find you have to correct for it constantly, because their clocks and yours drift apart exactly as relativity predicts. Speed slows time, without question or exception. Now push that fact to its ultimate limit. Push it all the way to the speed of light itself, the fastest anything can go, the speed limit of the universe. As you approach that speed, your time runs slower and slower compared to the outside world, until, right at the speed of light, it stops altogether. For something moving at the speed of light, time does not pass at all, and there is something that always moves at exactly the speed of light. Light itself. A particle of light, a photon, travels at that ultimate speed from the moment it is born to the moment it dies, which means that from the photon's own point of view, no time passes during its entire existence, however long that existence looks to us. Consider a photon born in the core of a distant star, one that streaks across the emptiness between the galaxies for 100 million years, before finally ending its journey in the mirror of a telescope or the wet surface of a human eye. From our outside vantage, that is an epic voyage, 100 million years of travel across an almost unimaginable gulf of space. But from the photon's own frame, there is no voyage at all. Its birth in the star and its death in the eye are the same instant, pressed together with nothing in between, no crossing, no waiting, no duration whatsoever. For the light itself, the star and the eye are touching. The 100 million years we so confidently measure simply are not there. I want to be careful and honest about what this does and does not mean, because it is easy to overstate, and the truth is strange enough without exaggeration. A photon does not have a mind, of course, and it does not sit there having experiences the way you do. When physicists say that from the photon's frame no time passes, they are making a precise mathematical statement, not telling a ghost story. Along the path that light travels through space-time, the amount of elapsed time works out to exactly 0. The technical name for this is that light follows what is called a null path, a route through the four-dimensional fabric along which the total spread of time comes to nothing at all. It is not that the photon is bored on a long trip that feels short, it is that, by the actual geometry of space-time, there is no trip in the sense we mean, no interval, no separation of before and after between the two ends. The star and the eye, so far apart in our reckoning, are connected by a path of 0 length in time. That is a fact about the structure of the universe, sitting in the equations, not a poetic flourish laid on top of them. And that fact is quietly devastating for the idea that time is a single river, carrying everything forward at one steady rate. Because here is a real, physical thing, the most abundant thing in the cosmos, streaming out of every star and every light bulb and every screen, for which the river simply does not flow. If the passage of time were a fundamental feature of reality, woven into the deepest level of the world, then everything real would have to answer to it, would have to be dragged along in the current. But light is not. Light threads through the whole history of the universe, along paths where no time elapses, meeting its birth and its death as a single event. The flow of time, then, cannot be the bedrock. It has to be something that emerges only for slow, heavy things like us, things with mass, things that cannot move at the ultimate speed and are therefore carried along the time direction at a measured pace, encountering our lives one slice at a time, fast enough, and the flow vanishes entirely, which means the flow was never a law of the universe. It was only ever a description of what it is like to be slow. Let me invite you to ride along gently, the way we tried to see the Tesseract. Imagine you could sit with that photon as it leaves the star. From the outside, the story is enormous. You escape the blazing surface, you cross the darkness between galaxies, you outlive the very star that made you, which burns out and dies while you're still in transit, and after 100 million years of travel you finally end in a single flash against a telescope mirror. 100 million years. But ride with the photon, and there is none of that. There is no long crossing, no darkness, no waiting, no boredom, no passage of any kind. The instant you're born in the star and the instant you end in the mirror are one and the same moment, fused, with all that space and all those eons folded down to nothing. From the seat of the fastest traveller in the universe, the journey has no length, and the 100 million years has no duration. The whole of it is a single point. Feel what that does to the idea of time as a universal marching river. For light, the river has no length at all. The past and the future, birth and death, beginning and end, all collapse into one instant. And if 100 million years can fold into a single moment for one perfectly real, perfectly physical point of view, then the smooth, one directional flow of time that you have trusted your entire life, is not a fundamental law of the cosmos written into its foundations. It is a story told by slow things, by lumps of matter like you and me that happen to move far below the speed of light and are therefore dragged along the time direction at a stately pace, meeting our lives one slice at a time. Light does not experience the flow because light does not have to. The universe already contains, in its most common and most fundamental messenger, a perspective from which all of time is a single now. That is not philosophy or interpretation. That is what the equations say, and it has passed every test. And here that phrase from the geometry comes back, the one I asked you to remember when we built the tesseract. We are always looking at the shadow, and we never see the object. We said it about the hypercube, about how every image of a tesseract is only a three-dimensional shadow of a shape we cannot see whole. But turn it now onto your own life, and it means something far more personal. You're always looking at the shadow of your life, never the object. The slice you're standing in, this single moment, is a shadow cast by the whole four-dimensional shape of your existence, down onto the thin screen of your perception. You have spent your entire life studying those shadows, one after another, mistaking the parade of them for the thing itself, when the thing itself, the whole object, has been there all along, complete, in a direction you were built unable to face. Light knows this in its own way. It feels no shadow and no flow, because it meets its whole existence at once. We are the slow ones, reading our lives one line at a time, calling the reading a life. So we have arrived, by honest steps, at a genuinely staggering place. The physics does not contain a universal present. Different observers cannot even agree on what is happening now across great distances. The fastest thing in the universe experiences no passage of time at all, and a man who understood all of this better than anyone stood beside the loss of his dearest friend and found in it not emptiness, but a strange permanence. Everything points the same way, toward a universe where your whole life already exists, fixed and whole, and the flow you feel is the illusion of a creature trapped one dimension too low. But I have promised you honesty from the first sentence, and honesty requires that I now turn around and ask the hardest questions of all. Is this really proven? Does it truly mean your choices are meaningless? And is this idea, at the end of the night, a horror, or is it something closer to a mercy? Those questions deserve real answers, and it is time to give them. Part 10. The Terror and the Mercy. Let us begin with the fear that troubles people most, because it is the most human one. If your whole life already exists, if every choice you think you have not yet made is already sitting there at its coordinate, already decided, then surely nothing you do matters. Surely you're just a passenger, carried helplessly through a story that was written without you, going through the motions of choosing while the outcome was fixed all along. That is the dread that the block universe wakes in almost everyone the first time they truly take it in, and it deserves a careful answer rather than a comforting slogan, because the answer is more interesting than the fear. The mistake hiding inside that dread is a subtle one. It is the assumption that if your future is fixed, then it must have been fixed by something other than you, imposed on you from outside, like a script handed to an actor who would rather say different lines. But the block does not work that way. In the block universe, your choices are not bypassed or overruled. They are part of the structure. The reason the fabric has the shape it has, along your stretch of it, is precisely that you are in there making those choices, weighing them, agonizing over them, deciding. Your deliberation is not a puppet show performed over a script written elsewhere. Your deliberation is the pen. The future is fixed, yes, but it is fixed in part by you living it, by the choices that are genuinely yours, woven into the block rather than erased by it. Take yourself out of the fabric and the fabric would be different. That is not the description of a passenger. That is the description of an author who happens to be reading the finished book one page at a time. There is a subtle point here that is worth making slowly, because it dissolves the fear more completely than any reassurance can. When people first hear that the future is fixed, they picture it as though someone else has already written the ending, and they are being forced to march toward a conclusion chosen against their will. But notice the extra assumption buried in that picture. The assumption that fixed must mean fixed by someone, decided in advance by a will that is not yours. Remove that assumption, and the fear loses its object. The future being fixed does not require a scriptwriter who set it down ahead of you. In the block, The future is fixed simply by being there. The way the far end of a road you have not yet walked is already there, not because anyone decreed where you would end up, but because the road is a whole thing and the far end is part of it. Your steps along that road are still your steps. No one took them for you. The road is complete and your walking of it is real, both at once, and there is no contradiction between them. So the determinism that frightens people turns out to be a gentler thing than its name. It does not mean you are helpless. It means your choices are dependable enough to be part of a coherent whole, that the you at every moment reliably does what that you, with all their history and character and love and fear, would actually do. That is not the erasure of freedom. That is what freedom has always actually been. You were never a random number generator, spitting out unpredictable actions from nowhere. You were always a person whose choices flow from who you are. And a universe in which those choices are woven permanently into the fabric is a universe that takes them seriously enough to keep them forever. The block does not steal your authorship. It archives it. Every real choice you have ever made is not erased by time's passing, but preserved, exactly as you made it, at its coordinate, permanent. If anything, the block honors your choices more than the ordinary picture does, because in the ordinary picture your choices vanish into a dead past the instant you make them, and in the block they never vanish at all. Think of it this way. The film reel is already printed, every frame in place from the first to the last, but you are still the one starring in every frame. The performance is still yours, the choice is still yours, the meaning still yours. That the reel is complete does not reach back and hollow out the acting. The acting is what put the frames on the reel in the first place. Many serious thinkers hold exactly this position, that a completely fixed four-dimensional history and a completely real sense of choice and agency are not enemies at all, because fixed describes the finished painting seen from outside, while choice describes what it is like to be the brush moving across the canvas. You are the brush. The painting is done and the painting is being made, and both of those are true because you are living the very stroke that fixes what the finished picture is. So the block does not turn you into a prisoner of fate. It only tells you that the story you are authoring, choice by choice, is a story that, seen from outside time, is already whole. Now let me keep the other promise I made, the promise of honesty, because the title of this video makes a strong claim. An intellectual honesty requires me to walk it back to exactly what is true. The title says scientists proved your whole life already exists, and the careful truth is more subtle than the word proved suggests. What physics has genuinely established, beyond any serious doubt, is the framework. Space-time is real. Relativity is correct to staggering precision, confirmed by every experiment we can devise. There is no universal present moment. Simultaneity really is relative. The flow of time really does not appear in the fundamental equations. All of that is as solid as anything in science. What physics has not done is prove, with the finality the word deserves, that the future exists in exactly the same full-blooded way the present does. The block universe, this reading where all moments are equally real, is the most straightforward interpretation of relativity, and it is held by many serious physicists. But it is an interpretation, not a theorem. There are honest rivals, and you should know they exist. Some thinkers argue for what is called a growing block, in which the past and the present are fully real, but the future genuinely does not exist yet, and reality grows moment by moment as new slices are added to the finished part. Others defend presentism, the common-sense view that only the present is real, and work hard to square it with relativity. The mathematics of relativity by itself does not force one of these pictures over the others. So the fully honest way to state our conclusion is not that scientists proved your life is already complete. It is something more careful, and I think more powerful, precisely because it is true. Mainstream physics has quietly removed every scientific reason to be certain that the future does not already exist. It has taken away the universal now that the ordinary picture of time depended on, and it has left the block universe standing as the most natural reading of our best theory. That alone, without any overreach, is enough to pull the floor out from under the everyday certainty that this moment is the only real one. You do not have to be sure the block is true to lose your certainty that it is false, and losing that certainty is already the whole of the vertigo. So where does that leave us? Sitting here in the quiet, holding an idea that may be the deepest truth about our existence, or may be the most seductive misreading of a beautiful theory. I think it leaves us somewhere gentler than the fear first suggested, and I want to end there, because the terror in the title is real, but it is not the last word. Return one final time to that phrase from the block, the cold one. The universe never throws anything away. In the middle of the fear, it sounded like a life sentence, every loss locked in place forever, but turn it over and look at its other face. If nothing is ever thrown away, then nothing you have loved has ever truly been lost. Every person you have grieved still exists, at their own coordinates, in every moment they were alive, as real in the fabric as they ever were. The morning that felt too ordinary to remember, the last conversation you did not know was the last. The people who are gone from your slice of now, none of them have been erased. They are elsewhere, along a direction you cannot turn to face, but elsewhere is not nowhere. This was the comfort Einstein reached for beside his friend's grave, and it was not a lie he told to soften the loss. It was what the physics genuinely suggests. The past is not a void that swallows everything behind you. It is a place you can no longer visit, still lit, still occupied, still real, holding everyone and everything you thought time had taken. The same fixedness that makes your death already exist is the fixedness that makes every good thing already, and always, exist too. The block does not only keep the ending, it keeps the whole of it, and so the growing, shrinking circle comes back one last time, and I hope by now it has changed for you the way the best ideas change, quietly, so that you cannot go back to seeing it the old way. The Flatlander watched a circle appear from nothing, swell, and vanish, and mourned it as a thing that lived and died when it was only the slice of a sphere that was whole the entire time. Your present moment is that circle. This night, this breath, this instant of your attention is one bright slice of a life that already exists whole, sliding along a dimension you were built unable to see. You will never look upon your life entire. You're always inside it, always at one point, always meeting it one slice at a time, but the whole shape is there, and it is yours, from the first coordinate to the last, and everyone you have ever loved is somewhere in it still, and nothing that has ever mattered has been thrown away. That is either the most frightening thing you have ever heard, or the most consoling, and I have come to believe it is not my place to tell you which. The physics hands you the shape and stays silent on how to feel about it, and maybe that silence is the honest answer. Maybe fear and comfort are just two slices of the same truth, and which one you meet depends only on where you happen to be standing when you look at it. So as you lie here in the dark with the ordinary certainty of the passing moment loosened just a little, you can hold the fear if you need to, or you can hold the mercy. Both are true. Both are already there, waiting at their coordinates, in the whole and finished and strangely beautiful object that is your one, unrepeatable, never lost life. And the moment you are living right now, this exact moment, will never, in the deepest sense the universe allows, be taken away from you. It was always there, it is there still, and it always will be.